Well, welcome to the May 2013 edition of BALLE's Community Capital Webinar Series. My name is Martin Sorge, and I serve as Spreading Solutions Manager here at BALLE. We have a couple dozen local economy leaders from across North America registered for today's webinar, and we're really delighted to have you all with us, so thank you for joining us. To get started, Mikel Davila on the BALLE staff will review a bit of technical housekeeping. Then I will provide a few reminders about this webinar series and introduce our topic and speakers for the day. Take it away, Mikel.
Hi, so my name is Mikel Davila, as Martin said, and I serve as the Spreading Solutions Associate at BALLE. I'm going to review a bit of housekeeping, provide a few reminders about this webinar series, and then hand it back to Martin to introduce our speakers and to get us started. So if you are dialed in by phone and can hear us, but have not joined us in the webinar room, please find a link in your reminder email from our registration system that will get you into the webinar room where you can view the presentation. Because of the number of webinar participants, we have the phone line muted. If you have a question for our presenters at any time during the webinar, please type your question in the public chat window. We'll hold most questions to the end of the webinar when we have time set aside for moderated Q&A. If you have technical difficulties at any point during the webinar, please note this in the chat window, and I will send you a private chat to help you get sorted out. The private chat window will show up as a new tab to the right of the public chat window on the top right corner of your screen and will flash red once the private chat has been initiated, and we can sort out your issues from there. Immediately after this webinar, you will receive a survey. This will help us evaluate and make improvements for future webinars. Your participation is greatly appreciated. Also, after each webinar, we will email all attendees and registrants a link to a full recording of the webinar, along with the presentation slides and a copy of the questions from the public chat. Please watch out for these emails from me over the next few days. And if you have any other questions about the registration or technical aspects of the webinar, I'll be happy to hear from you afterwards. So with that, I'll hand the floor back over to you, Martin, to get us started. So it looks like Martin just got kicked off. So I think, Renata, we are just going to go into the presentation. And James, he will be joining us once he gets back on the line, but I think he's having some phone issues today. And so I think we'll just jump right into the presentation, starting, I believe, with you, James. So James, thank you again, and Renata, for being part of our Community Capital series today with your topic. So if you could take it away, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. My name is James Fraser. I am one of the founding members of LION, the Local Investing Opportunities Network out of Port Townsend, Washington. We've been doing local investments in our community since 2008. And you know, our mission should be on your screen right now. Our mission is to create local opportunities for local individuals, businesses, and local investors to connect and network. So our approach from the very beginning has been to help people connect and network rather than trying to directly facilitate investment activity. So why did we get started with this? We wanted to help build prosperous local businesses, keep investing money in our local community, and help build a more resilient, sustainable local economy, as well as building community. So what we found early on is that investing money in our community, and there's quite a bit of it, was leaving and being held in banks and brokerage accounts in Wall Street and not really doing anything for our community. So this was a lot of the impetus. We were seeing people that needed money in local small businesses. In our community, we found that we needed to take action to be more proactive about getting money, our local resources that our citizens have, out of banks and brokerage accounts and get that moving into local small businesses where it could make a difference. We started in 2008 when there was a credit crisis going on, and we needed there was a need for more credit sources. Banks were pulling back. We wanted our citizens to step up. Our citizens wanted to step up. We just need to give them a way to do it. So that's why we formed Lion. What is it? Lion is a network of citizens that want to invest their money locally. So it's a membership-based group. Our members are the investors. And what we do is we help our members become aware of investing opportunities where we are. And to us, this is part of a nationwide movement that is getting money moving and making it work for local communities, community capital movement. We've always tried to make it something that's simple, straightforward, and it can be replicated anywhere. And as a final note, this is something that is not exactly new. Local investing, we like to think, is the original form of investing. So we're kind of getting back to our roots here. So also, just to be clear what we're not a bank. We're not a pooled investment like a mutual fund or a loan fund. We do not give investment advice. We do not make collective investment decisions. And we do this so that there's no centralized liability, which whenever you have centralized liability for advice or decision making, then you have risk and costs and overhead. And we wanted to be running very grassroots, very low or even no budget. So we're not a business, we're not a nonprofit. We don't have any kind of entity at all. In fact, we're just a group of people that like to connect and learn about local investing opportunities. So what kind of local investments do we see? We have mostly existing small businesses. These are businesses that are ongoing concerns in our community, have good reputations. People know the owners. We have maybe 9,000 people in our town, so everybody knows one another, and mostly. And so these are our lowest risk opportunities where someone that wants to refinance a credit card debt or a bank loan. These are usually 5 years or less loans or lines of credit. And I'd say about 90% of the time people are looking for loans instead of owners, or they're not looking to sell equity most of the time. We also sometimes get startup businesses, which are more speculative. And there's also a good amount of demand for real estate loans. However, we typically discourage those kind of local investments because they take up a lot more money. We feel that there is a higher multiplier for small business investments, in that money invested into a small business will turn around and hire people, put more money into the local economy through suppliers, vendors, and then in turn employees and owners will then go and re-spend their money locally. That's what we're really interested in, is helping local investment dollars create a more prosperous local economy. So briefly how it works, our investor members sign a membership agreement, and this provides for confidentiality, conflict resolution, and disclaimer of legal liability. Businesses submit their opportunities to our group, and then members receive them via email. Sometimes businesses are invited to present in person at our meetings, but not all do. Members that are interested in making an investment contact the applicant directly if they're interested in investing. And they can also form small groups of investors to work directly with business owners that are looking for financing. And then all deals are negotiated directly between those interested individuals. Lion, our group, has nothing at all to do with the process once connections have been made. So it's just literally an introduction network. And we meet as a group a few times per year to talk business, and we also host an annual community outreach event. So what does local investing look like? In our community, we've been running an annual survey. The last one was run about a year ago, so slightly dated info. in our town, our members have invested almost $3 million locally, and that's a pretty good average per active investor, 137,000. That's fairly high, but only because there's a few outsized investors. The average local deal was 64,000. So here you can see that people are usually doing multiple deals, mostly loans of some equity, mostly small business, some real estate. About half of all deals were single investors. The other were investor groups. And here's our average interest rate, a little over 5%, and the average loan a little under 5 years out. So just a quick few slides, examples of local investments that have been done. Secret Garden Cottages, this is a small real estate developer. Mount Townsend Creamery, this is a award-winning cheese maker. The Upstage, this is a nightclub and live entertainment venue. They got a bridge loan from one of the members. And this is one of our favorites, Fin River Farm and Cidery. They've helped pioneer our group. They've borrowed and raised money for equity in a variety of different businesses, including a cidery and a blueberry farm. So just quickly, how we recommend starting your own group. It starts with a core group of motivated investors that are committed to expanding local investing. You really need to have investors at the table, because without them, nothing happens. It doesn't work just to have passion and excitement from a group of activists. Although you don't need a ton of money, I would also say that you can start with microloans, and I would think that would work well. You've got to agree on basic principles, come up with your documents, your agreements, and then you spread the word locally, and especially focusing on educating other members of your local investing ecosystem, which we consider to be these kind of groups. See, nobody acts in a vacuum. As we all know, the local economy is an ecosystem, and this is how we see local investing happening. It's within a realm of several different entities that usually exist within within a community, including Small Business Development Center, Economic Development Council, local banks, local nonprofits, and educational institutions. So Renata is going to give you a great case study on how exactly the local ecosystem works. And so with that, I want to introduce Renata Kowalczyk. She is with WIN, Whatcom Investing Network. And WIN, I'll let her introduce in greater depth, but they are basically working with the same model that Lion has worked with. And there's a number of groups around the country that have been working with this model. And so it's something that it's evolving, and WIN is just a great example of how a group can start from scratch. I think they started about 2 years ago, and take it from there in a really good way. So Renata, do you want to hop right in?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you, James. And I want to check in to make sure that everyone can hear me well. If you can, just put your comment in a chat, and I'll try to adjust it. I am not in the middle of Pacific Ocean, but I am in a conference room in my co-working space. So thanks, Rachel. Hi. So as James had mentioned, I am part of Whatcom Investing Network. I am one of the founding members. And we actually started with purchasing the starter kit from Lion. And, thanks for switching my slide. So we established ourselves in mid-2011 out of Whatcom, of the transition Whatcom personal finance work group. So a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, in the ecosystem comment, James had mentioned that a lot of sustainability groups are a good starting point for the local investing groups as well as for membership. And that was true in our case. We had a personal finance group that formed during the great unleashing of transition Whatcom in 2010. And we were looking for ideas and ways to invest money locally. And a few months later, James and a few other folks came from BALLE to came to the BALLE conference, and we learned about the model and decided to implement it. So in the way of introducing our mission, we are, again, like Lion, an informal group of local citizens, and our focus is on Whatcom County. Whatcom County is where Bellingham resides, and we focus on local businesses that promote long-term sustainability. But here is the interesting part of it. Every member defines his or her parameters for sustainability. So we don't have a single definition because all the deals are made individually. So what I as an investor consider to be something supporting sustainability of my county will be completely different than another member's. Just a couple of notes about Whatcom County so you have a sense of what drives our economy, and you might be able to relate that to your own community. So per thousand, as James had described, is a community of now 9,000 residents. We serve Whatcom County with a population of 200. 80,000 of that are in Bellingham, which is the county seat and the largest city. And our main industries are agriculture and fisheries, a lot of entrepreneurship. 64% are 1 to 4 persons businesses. So there are a lot of small businesses that just cannot get funding from banks. So when today, we've been in existence for almost 2 years. We have 46 members. 20 to 25 of those members actively invest. We've loaned out nearly $700,000 in 10 projects. We have a 60% acceptance rate, meaning a percentage of investment opportunities that we have funded. And we have so far 100% repayment rate, so no defaults. So I'll talk a little bit how we use that data to move ourselves forward, but let's talk about how we decided to catalyze our economy, our local investing. So we're doing things a little bit differently than Lion because we are a much larger community and we really wanted to build relationships and trust. So we first have created monthly orientation sessions. So we meet monthly. And there is an orientation session that is open to anyone who is interested in learning about the model. And after that, it's getting to know the member social hour. And then the very last piece of that is open only to members, and that is where businesses present that have 15 minutes. And those businesses have to, prior to that, attend the orientation. And businesses always have to present to us in person. They can send the information ahead of time, but we really want to connect with them and get to know them. We've also decided to build very strong partnerships with other organizations. Sustainable Connections, which is a local network of BALLE, Small Business Administration, Port of Bellingham, all the major players in economic development that work with entrepreneurs and local businesses. They've been through our orientation and know our model. Tim had asked me if we only make loans. Majority of we members make only loans. That's what they're comfortable with. There are a few of us, including myself, who've done equity investments. And loan terms really, really vary. They range, they depend on collateral, if there is security or not. So every deal is completely different. And we can talk later about different ranges of interest rates, but there is no set standard for any of the deals. We've offered workshops for businesses and non-traditional sources of income, so we've been really going out there and doing community outreach in various community organizations as well, and business conferences. So going back to the statistics that I shared with you a couple of slides earlier, you could see from them probably there were a couple of areas that we've identified as our initial growing challenges. So the first problem is that only half of our members are participating in making loans. So we actually done a survey and we asked them, what is that you're looking for? What is that that's preventing you from participating in deals? And one of the things that we heard loud and clear was that, as I can quote one of the members, I do not even know what questions to ask. I've never done this. I don't know what it means to evaluate business. I don't know what to ask. Could we be trained? Is there an education available? So we've looked around and we had asked one of our members who is a local CPA and well-versed in direct investments, and we've created UWIN, University for Winning. And we conduct workshops on due diligence and reading financial statements. We're actually going to have a second workshop on financial statements in a couple of weeks. And we're now also going to be expanding our workshops to self-directed IRAs and other topics that our members will ask. The second issue the second solution for bringing more members is this summer. We just made that decision last week. We will organize more of house parties and getting the word out into community for folks to participate. And the second issue that we've identified was that only 60% of the businesses submitting to us, the deals were accepted. So what we've identified is that a lot of times those businesses were not prepared with the appropriate documentation, the financial statements were not well put together. So we've established partnerships with local consultants to assist businesses in being better prepared. But we also now require, and I'm seeing some questions around SEC regulations and state regulations, and I can address those hopefully here and then during the Q&A. But we also now require that businesses obtain small offering exemption from Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. We had discovered that first of all, it tells us that the business is really serious. The exemption, it's not very difficult to file. It costs only $50. But what it allows is, it allows legally for the business to obtain loans from up to 20 of non-accredited investors. And of course, as always, unlimited number. And so looking through all the exemptions, we decided that that's the one that will be most appropriate for anyone who will be presenting to WIN and getting loans from WIN, since most of our members are non-accredited investors. So keys to success, as we had learned so far within less than a year of operating, that's to educate. We need to educate our members, our community, local media, local economy, ecosystem partners, financial advisors, anyone who is doing any kind of work with our businesses need to be educated. We share and celebrate success stories. We had the huge swell of new submissions when there was an article published in Bellingham Herald about our first deal with Twin Brook Creamery, a local dairy farm. And the owner of the farm, with tears, was describing the moment of signing. I think he signed 6 or 7 separate loan agreements with different members, but he was signing them at his kitchen table on his farm over milk and zucchini bread. And that was just something that really spoke to everyone in our community, that it's really about friends lending friends to friends, and it gave us a big boost in our community. The other key to success is to create and leverage partnerships with other members, as we mentioned. And finally, James is working on a very exciting project, localinvesting.com. Make sure that you save this URL. This would be a place for all of you, all the communities, to connect and learn from one another and share resources. So this is very exciting next phase in local investing. And so I will pause here. The very last slide has our information, James's and I, for further information, but let me pause here and then open up for questions.
Great, thanks James and Renata. So we have a handful of questions about a couple of different groups of items. So I wanted to start with this question about the SEC regulations and security laws. So Benjamin asked that he thought it was illegal to fund startups through Lion because of SEC regulations, and I know you have some unique regulations in Washington State, but I wondered if you could touch a little bit on this.
Sure, I can start and James jump in to add anything that I will miss. So 4,000 and so the Lion and Whatcom Investing Network are within Washington State, and we are very blessed to live in a state which had decided that whatever rules SEC had put in place are sufficient enough. So our state rules are at par with SEC rules. There are no more beyond, like California has much stricter rules. There are additional state rules that make all of what we're talking about, I don't know if it will be straight out illegal, but I know for sure it will be much, much more challenging. So as long as the business has a way to show that they've had, they've obtained an exemption and they're allowed to pitch to investors, like for us the 504 is the way to do it, then they are not breaking SEC rules. So we actually loan to startups. James, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, you know, I'm not aware of any reason why startups would be treated differently. You know, the key is that every business is responsible for their own compliance with securities laws. We can't force them to be compliant or to know what their responsibilities are. We feel uncomfortable even trying to educate them, although we're working on how to do that in a better way. So ultimately, you know, what we try to do is, because we're talking about, you know, micro businesses where not everybody's going to have access to a securities lawyer, to set up an environment where it's unlikely that people are going to be violating securities law. So, like for example, we try to give people a lot of opportunities to meet. Everything takes place in private. We're a membership-only organization. We're trying to avoid any kind of public solicitation, any kind of advertising, unless the businesses have gone through, you know, a registration to be able to advertise, which is pretty rare in this kind of environment. So yeah, that's basically the crux of it.
Right, and I see a question from Tim for both Lion and WIN. How did you go about funding and assembling your core funding group of local investors? So I'll start and then I'll hand over to James. With WIN, that was Transition Whatcom's personal finance group. And we had then reached out to other folks who we knew in our community through Sustainable Bellingham, through Sustainable Connections. We knew through personal connections there were enough individuals who were interested in investing locally, or at least they were grumbling about the fact that their money is somewhere out there in the Wall Street stratosphere. And I spent 11 years on Wall Street, so I bring that experience to the foreground. And so we've done a survey. We actually done an online survey and reached out to those folks personally, and we said, if we would create this group, and a network and provide a vehicle for you to meet with businesses. How much money do you think that you could invest? And within the 2 weeks, there was almost 1 million that people had said. And they said, I'm being very conservative here. So that's how we started. With personal relationships with some groups that we knew that will be open to that idea, and with conducting a survey to get a sense of how much money is actually out there available for lending. James, what about Lion?
What is the question?
The question was, how did you go about finding and assembling your co-funding group?
Our group kind of came together out of the local sustainability group, Local 2020, who's still hosting our website to this day. We had people that were investing locally, but in a kind of scattered, disorganized way as well. And we had some issues around confidentiality, like there was an opportunity that was kind of sensitive related to some real estate, and basically like the wrong person heard about it, and there was an outcome that was less than pleasant. And so all these kind of things came together, inspiring people to get organized, create a membership-only organization that today has only rejected one applicant, so we're very inclusive in that way. But we still have, operate in private and, with confidentiality, so that we can kind of help facilitate good outcomes for the community, which is our main concern. So we should probably move on to some of these other questions. You want to?
Yeah, I see a whole bunch of questions about slow money, and I want to address this because I've done some work and partnerships with Slow Money Northwest. And there are quite a bit of differences. So first of all, slow money, the investments are only open to accredited investors. And some of the events around the country, they even have a mentioning in their email invitation that you should really be an accredited investor to be able to attend the presentation. So what Lion model is that we're providing, it's democratizing this process, expanding it to all non-accredited investors. There's always also a difference in expected rate of return. Slow money, by its design, it's focused on, like the name would say it, very, very small returns, slow money. So they're looking at 1 to 2% interest rate. Our interest rate at WIN range from 5% to 12%. And Rachel had asked, how long does it take to get a response of Title IV? It's 2 weeks. And it's quite funny how that happens. They do not provide an answer. So the business will send an application with a $50 check made out to Washington State Treasury, and the check will be cashed. And that's pretty much what our businesses have been deeming as the okay, because in all the experiences, and I'm on the board of one of the startups who had just done this a few months ago, we've never heard of them as a move forward. So we assume that cashing a check, it's their okay of the process, and we move forward to take the funds.
Great, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of questions that were asked earlier in the call about due diligence. So some folks would like to hear a little bit more about the due diligence process. Is it just shared due diligence? What does that look like, and what's the liability in that?
Yeah, so we share due diligence not as a group, but as the subgroups that form to work on specific deals, and I believe that WIN operates the same way in this regard. The key is that our membership agreement is very, very clear, and we are all very, very clear that everybody has to take responsibility for themselves and for their own investment decisions. So nobody can rely on anyone else's advice or due diligence or work. And if they are, they're making that choice consciously. We also ask people that aren't comfortable doing their own due diligence or making their own decisions to consult their own professional advisors, whether that be a CPA or consultant or financial advisor. So that way, everybody stands on their own 2 feet, so to speak, and no one's taking liability or responsibility for anyone else's decisions. And so, like I said earlier, this keeps liability away from being centralized, which, when you have centralized liability, you have centralized costs, and that is something we've always wanted to avoid. That does kind of tie into another question I've been seeing about fees. I just want to address that real quick because it is kind of related. We don't have any kind of dues or fee structure, and this is a very important reason for that. In Washington State, and I suspect a lot of other states, the definition of a broker-dealer, and this is basically what you would call Charles Schwab or Merrill Lynch, they're brokers, and the definition is basically anyone that helps facilitate investments for a fee. And so we basically felt that if we took money for any reason, that we might fall under that definition, which would be extremely bad for us. Basically, you don't even want to think about what it takes to register as a broker-dealer anywhere. So to us, it was always a volunteer grassroots organization, and for more reasons than just one. But basically, volunteer effort has always been a huge part for us, and 5 years later, we're still going. Every so often, it's a little troublesome to get new people to step up to the plate, but seems to be doing it. We separate, we have a few main roles that need to be filled at any given point, and we rotate them. One is membership coordinator, one is investing opportunity contact person, and we also have just like a community outreach person, which I am, because we get a lot of inquiries from around the country on our model and what we're doing. The Local Investing Resource Center is a website I'm working on now. It should be up soon to help field a lot of those kind of inquiries, give everybody a forum or multiple forums for sharing and connecting with each other, a directory of all the people that are going to be active in this area. This is a growing area we see, and we don't want to be the bottlenecks in it anymore. So we want people to be able to connect directly with each other, and so that's what the local-investing.com will be about. So I'll step off the mic for a second and go to the next questions.
Great. So Carmen did ask a question earlier on too that kind of follows up on the due diligence question. So are the deals that the line groups or when take part in, are they typically bankable deals, or are they a lot higher risk? And if they are bankable, what is the motivation of the borrower to use this model versus a traditional bank, in your opinion?
So at WIN, they're both. We had many times either the startup or existing business will come to us, and they are not bankable because the bank needs to see 5 Cs, and they might be missing 1 C, and they're out of luck. So, for example, the Twin Brook Creamery, our first dairy farm deal, they had a bad year in 2010. That was something, some kind of a bacteria in the grass, and the cows got sick, and so the bank looked at it, and they said it was a local bank. This is a family-owned farm in 3 generations, and the local bank said, we can't help you. You should go to WIN. And they came to us, and we helped them. So because the bank would not take cows as a collateral, and our members actually did. So that's one. WIN is a bankable deal. We have a couple of those, and this is what we heard from businesses. Businesses said, I rather have friends and family, local members of my community invest in my business and make money out of investing in my business than go to a bank, because it's a win-win. What happens is and I've given a loan to one of the local restaurants that way. It stimulates the local economy, local investing. But here's another benefit. As an investor, guess where do I eat my dinners and lunches if I'm inviting friends? I always go to the same place. So it's a win-win for businesses from that perspective.
Great, great. And I think that follows up on one of the other questions, which was about the role of trust in the deal structure. So generally this model, you need to develop a certain amount of trust and relationship with entrepreneurs who may be your neighbors. So could you touch a little bit on how essential the role of trust and relationships are in these deals?
It absolutely is, and that is yet when our meetings are more frequent because we are a larger community of 80,000 plus. And so we use our orientation and our social hours as a way of meeting folks. We want to first to know them and build trust. We also, in our membership, ask that when someone is applying to join, they are recommended by 2 existing members. So we are very, very keen on weaving the network very tightly that is based on trust. It's a most vital ingredient in all of those deals. See, when I do workshops in a community, I do them on a monthly basis to businesses, and they ask me, well, how do investors make their decisions, how much money to put in a business? And we're talking about risk. And I said, well, we do all the proper due diligence, but in the end of the day, I always suggest to investors to use what I call the farmer's market hug test. And what I mean by that is we have a weekly farmer's market on Saturdays. So if I am an investor and looking to put money in a local business and I'm thinking about the right amount and do I trust this individual with my money or that business, then the question I ask myself is, would I be able to honestly and lovingly and openly give a hug to this person if they would lose my money? And if the answer is no, then I'm not giving that money. Or maybe I'm reducing the amount. But in the end of the day, it's about building a community. So if the building community and trust, it takes the precedence over making money.
Great, thank you. And to follow up on that, I know, Renata, you said that in WIN you haven't had any defaults yet. James, has Lion had any defaults, or what is the plan with dealing with that if it comes up?
Right. Yes, we have had some defaults, but it's been interesting to learn about how that really looks. Technically a default is when the agreement between the investor and the business was not followed for any reason. So that could mean a late payment or a missed payment, anything like that. So what we've seen, it doesn't mean that the investors lost their money. That is, one possible outcome of a default. But there's a variety of outcomes of defaults. We've seen businesses, during this recession, at times needing to have a little time to make a payment, or needing to kind of restructure their loan so that perhaps it goes to interest only for a year or two, and then it starts paying down the principal. So, it's really, we've been operating, I guess, longer than others, and just over time you've seen that, you're just going to get a lot of different situations. And the key is to understand that the investors and the business owners are creating a real relationship, and it needs to be a working relationship. And people only should be investing with people that they know and are comfortable with and trust. And if that's not there, I would not advise investing until it is there, and very strongly. Because when things change, and things do change, you need to be able to work with people. And so we've had, I would say, a very high success rate of working with defaults. There's just been a few. I'm sorry I can't quantify it at this point, but there's been a handful out of maybe like almost 50 deals. Maybe there's been 3 or 4 or 5 where there's been a technical default. They've been successfully restructured, repaid, almost every time. There's a couple that are still in progress, and it remains to be seen how they'll get worked out. But there have not been any examples. Well, actually, there's been one. I think there's one recently where it does look like there's most likely going to be a total loss of investment. That was due to one business that ended up not having lawsuits with like a former owner and patents, and it just became a total mess, and they ended up in bankruptcy. Basically, the investors that went into that deal, they're not mad. They basically have said, the ones that I've spoken with have said that they learned a lot from it. They learned that they should have been doing much more careful due diligence, and they kind of just got excited about this one particular deal. It was like a technology-related deal. So far, it's just been a lot of learning experiences. Hasn't chased people away. The vast majority of the deals are working exactly as planned. But I do think that you have to expect, if you're going to be doing this for a while, that defaults will happen, and that the best solution for them is to have good, solid relationships in place and do business with people you're comfortable with, like Renata said.
Great.
And I saw a question from Amber about models for large metropolitan areas. And I've lived in New York City for 19 years, so if I would not be in Bellingham, but I would be in New York City, and I saw a note that there is a lion there. But what I would do is I would reach out to existing communities. That's a good starting point. So not look at the whole metropolitan area, but look at the sustainability groups, communities that already exist. An example of it is one of co-working places, communities in Seattle, had started talking to me about creating their own network for their own membership. So where there is already an understanding that we are all in it together, and there is already a trust and mutual relationships, that could be the best place to start. So even if it's a metropolitan area, I would start it small and build it from there. And it could be multiple networks in the same area.
Great. And I think we have a couple more kind of more practical questions about the way that these deals work. Jill asked about that time frame. So when an entrepreneur first engages with your group through the due diligence and to when somebody's signing a check, how long does that process last actually?
So when it's about, and I'm pausing here because we just gone through evaluation of the process and we're going to streamline it. So it was about a month and a half. So the business would come to the orientation, we'll get to know them, that they could present the next month, and then within usually a week or 2 weeks, the due diligence is conducted and the checks, individual checks are signed if members want to move forward. And again, they make their own individual decisions. But we have now new members who've been trained in doing orientation, and they've offered to do those orientations when they need it ad hoc. So the business doesn't have to wait for another month. We can just do them as we go along, and then they can present at the next meeting. So that could cut it to us as little as 2 weeks.
Great, thank you. And then I had another question to follow up with that, which was how, once an investor signs the check, is there any support that investor gives the entrepreneur outside of just writing checks, whether that be mentoring or spreading the word about their business or matching them up with some other mentors in the community or anything like that? Do you have any examples of things like that?
I have some. And James, do you have some? Do you want to share from Port Townsend?
Well, yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of mentoring happening, and as well just following up. I've seen investors be customers. I've also seen creative deals where businesses or be part of the returns would be in kind, like blueberries or cheese. Yeah, there's all sorts of creativity that can happen when you're doing local investing. What about you, Renata?
Ditto to what you said. We've definitely seen folks getting their portion of the interest repaid in food, in beer, and wine. And I also noticed there is quite a bit of, we have a few members who are quite versed. They've started their own businesses, so they're good with financial statements and planning. There was one business that came to us, and they actually asked for more money than a couple of our members who've reviewed their paperwork and their financial needs. They said, you know what, actually you don't need to ask for that much. And we will show you how to optimize your startup costs and how to be more efficient. So they took on being their mentors, and that business launched with their help and support. So yeah, I see that being across the board, and pretty much every deal has some level of involvement afterwards, except for telling business how to do their job. That's not our job. But anyway, we can support them, we will support them.
Great, great. Those are great examples. So we are about 5 minutes to time, so I wanted to ask both James and Renata if they have any final recommendations for people looking to start their own Lion groups, or suggestion for entrepreneurs who are looking to engage with a Lion group or a similar group in their area. So James, could I start with you?
Sure. I guess I would just really say it's all about connections, and in addition to finding people that have money and are wanting to invest it locally and have the extra energy to engage, local investing takes more effort. This is not like Wall Street spoon feeding us investments, and the whole, the benefit that local investing really brings is creating connections and relationships in the local community that weren't there before, or maybe they're there but they take on a new dimension with people working together, financially and economically, and it just opens up a whole bunch of new conversations in the community. We've seen it affect how government happens, how economic development happens, how entrepreneurship classes are taught. There's just all sorts of possibilities for change. And so you really need to have investors that have the energy and the passion to step beyond the conventional models that Wall Street has developed very effectively over the past several decades. People hardly remember how to do handshake business deals, and by that I mean, across the table directly with a neighbor. And so, we have to revive these skills. We have to learn how to do due diligence, and I love Wins You Win initiative on educating people. I'd like to have some kind of educational component with the local investing project, the website. So you just need people that are willing to step up and put in the effort, and the rewards are incredible. And just the outcomes we've seen, businesses that are running in our community that providing services that would not be there without local investors. And the longer we're doing it, the more the community becomes a product of this commitment to local investing and buying local and just supporting ourselves is really what it comes down to. So yes, it takes some passion, some energy. I'd say start with that, and find other people in your ecosystem that support that as well. And that's all I'd have to say. It's a really wonderful thing, and I really recommend it. I would love to see one in every community.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
To add to this, someone had asked me once, how is it that this organization has been able to sustain itself? I'm sure many folks on this call have been involved in starting movements and volunteer-based organizations. And I can tell you, I've never been involved in volunteer-based organization that has so much energy and passion and enthusiasm that it's self-sustaining and ongoing. And I think a big part of it is that we really get that everybody benefits from it. So this is not just a situation where we give, but every member who's investing is also receiving. So it creates that cycle that we want to see in our community of giving and receiving, giving and receiving. And that's what it self-sustains it without any structures, without any fees, without anything that normal culture will tell us that will be required for the organization to function. And the last piece about it that I can't stress enough, build partnerships in the community with all the entities that already work with businesses. Become a name that everybody knows that they can go to when the bank says no. Just before this call, I got an email like this. So that will also sustain you, being a part of the whole ecosystem. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Renata and James. Those are really insightful and thoughtful kind of finishing comments. So just a couple closing reminders. I know we're right at time, but after this webinar, we will email everyone who registered a link to the call audio, the presentation materials, and a copy of the questions from the public chat window. Please watch for that in an email from Mikel Davila over the next few days. You can also purchase past webinars on our website at bealocalist.org. And while you're there, I hope all of you either have or will register for our conference in June in Buffalo and register for the July Community Capital webinar if you haven't done that already. And then right after this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to a short survey about the webinar. We really value your feedback, and we use this short survey to improve our webinars and hear about the topics that you most want to see. So in closing, I want to give a really big thanks to James and Renata for a really thoughtful and fascinating webinar, and I hope to see you all next month in Buffalo and then back on our next Community Capital webinar in July. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah, take care.